Today we're kind of going to talk a little about this Panasonic receiver 8-track player from 1970, the RE-7800 Montvale. We're kind of going to talk a little about this cassette recorder stereo, the Realistic SCT-25 from 1982. We're going to kind of talk a little bit about impedances and why I don't understand them, particularly with this unit, which is going to lead us to discussing this line level to phono input adapter, which I apparently understand even less. But all this starts with a little discussion on fire safety and how this all got started. As you can see, we had a little excitement here on the workbench a couple of weeks ago, which led to a few things. One, I'm getting rid of all the little cheapy thin gauge alligator clips, going with stronger, thicker clips. And I also realized at a point during the excitement that my workbench area is missing something important. So we now have a fire extinguisher at the workbench. Why I didn't have one of those earlier, I don't know. Never crossed my mind. But it did that day. And so I made a trip to Harbor Freight where I picked up that extinguisher. It was interesting, although it's from Harbor Freight, it's actually made in Mexico, not China, which gives me a little bit of feel-goodness. I'm not sure I'd want a fire extinguisher made in China. But now let's go back and talk about what happened there. After the little excitement, I had made a mess of my workbench area here and had to straighten things up, which involved turning the receiver around, which hadn't been turned around in ages. Where I noticed there was a phono input and a tape input in the back. And I had recently had a situation where I had wanted an input and had never even thought to look back there for inputs. So let's take a minute to look back behind that receiver and see what jacks are back there. Speaker out. Output jacks. Antenna. And that's your phono input. And there's that confusing tape input. What selector switch would that go to? Here's a close-up of one of the speakers. Nothing fancy. Well, now, I wanted to hook my stereo cassette deck up out here. I've never really had a good stereo cassette player out here before. So I said, well, I'll hook it into the tape input jacks there on the back, which led to a certain problem. Let's look at the input selectors for the receiver. We have AM, FM stereo, FM, and when you're on FM, if the station is picking up as stereo, this will be lighted. Remember, this is from 1970, when most FM stations still were not being broadcast in stereo. So you could go all the way down to the just stereo and hope you could pick up a few stations. or go to FM and see what stations were in stereo. Now you have your phono input and tape. But that tape input relates to if you're going to play an 8-track. So my question was what selector do I use when I'm in the tape input jacks? It was confusing. I tried putting the output from the SCT-25 into the jacks on the back and putting it on tape, and I got nothing because it still started the 8-track player. And I found a interesting thing on the internet, a 1970 magazine ad for this, which will show, and it talks about how this unit is nice because in the future you can use it for a cassette deck, and I think I'm quoting right here. They say, when things loosen up. I don't know what that meant, when things loosen up. Here's the RE-7800 in a 1970 ad. It's the Mont Vale. And you'll notice a part there towards the end where the future lies. And the top bright column, sort of. Headphones, even a cassette deck when things loosen up a little. So what does that mean, when things loosen up a little? I don't understand. But whatever it is, mine doesn't really play through it. I guess before we should go any further, I should talk about the tape deck that I had originally planned to show. This is a Realistic SCT-25 from 1982. These were made from 82 to 84. They're stereo. You can use 2 mics. You have a selector for chromium dioxide or normal. Counter. If you're using a chromium dioxide tape, it will recognize it and the green light will come on. When you're recording auto level, the red light comes on. Let's see, on the back we have our inputs for recording source and an output level control and your power cord. And simulated walnut grain finish. It's amazing how something like that can stay on for over 30 years. Underneath you have your specifics. Date code 5A2. I think that means May of 1982. These were first available in late October 1981. I think I have a page out of a brochure I can show. This is from the 1982 Radio Shack catalog. New for 82. Available October 30th, 1981. The SCT-25 for $80. Compact and easy to use, has auto level for perfect recording from any stereo source or live. Just add mics. Pause, tape counter, auto stop, simulated walnut finish. But it's a reasonable little performer and it'll be good out here on the bench. And when I first got it and I realized there was no tape selector switch, I said, well, I'm going to have to use the phono input. And without even trying the phono input, I said, well, it's going to need some type of line level to phono level attenuator. So I bought this little, I think it was $8 from MCM without trying the Phono. And that's pretty much the entire tape deck. So right now we have the cassette deck plugged into the Phono inputs on the back of the Panasonic. All right, that doesn't sound too bad plugged into the Phono inputs without any attenuation. Now, as near as I can tell from looking at the service manual I have, the jack for the Phono input is 2 million ohms on this Panasonic. I don't know what the output ohms are for this little cassette recorder, but it can't be too much. Probably under 5,000 certainly. But it's playing fine. So, what does it sound like? Although I couldn't figure out how it would do it, I decided to try it on the tape inputs, even though there's not a selector for tape on the Panasonic. And this is what I got. So leaving the selector on Phono, you can already hear the severe hum. This being line level, that being Phono. So we'll press the play. But this is not even plugged into the Phono input on the back of the Panasonic. This is plugged into the tape. And it is getting some signal through it. So I don't quite know what the connections are back there, and I still don't know what it means when the instructions in 1970 said you can hook a cassette player up when things loosen up a little. I find that very mysterious. So now we have the cassette deck plugged into the tape inputs on the back of the Panasonic with the Phono attenuator in line. Without going much further, I'll just say that there is no signal. So what little signal we had without the attenuator is gone with the attenuator from the line level source. Now we've hooked the attenuator from the cassette line out into the Phono line in for the Panasonic, and you remember it sounded real good, or good enough for this old stuff without the attenuator. So you can hear just a little bit of volume. So this attenuator is knocking the line level output down a whole lot. But it doesn't work the way you would think it would for a line photo. It should make a line level source sound good with a Phono input, but it sounded much better without the attenuator. Let's take the attenuator out of line here. play it again. Well, sounds reasonably good with the line level cassette deck plugged directly into the Phono inputs with no attenuator. Don't get that hum. Volume's good. So apparently I don't know much about impedances because I can't figure out how these are matching or why they aren't matching the way I would expect them to match, or mismatching the way I would expect them to mismatch. Not sure why my little attenuator's not working the way I would think it would. But anyway, that's somewhat of a little mixed up demonstration of this 1970 Panasonic receiver, which works pretty well. I didn't go through all the functions of it. Nothing unnormal about any of it. The 8-track works fine. Everything works well. The controls could use cleaning again. I don't think I've cleaned them in a couple of years. And that's also a little look at the little SCT-25 from Radio Shack. And I am going to leave it out here hooked up to the Phono input, since that's the way it seems to want to play nice. And this all started with a little fire problem, or more smoke than fire, but it was still a little scary when I had to move things around my workbench, as I had messed everything up in the excitement of shoving things around and tossing things on the floor, and made me look at the back of the Panasonic. So at least now I know I have some more inputs back there, although for the life of me I cannot figure out why this has a tape input jacks on the back, no selector for it up front. But maybe someday I'll solve that mystery, or maybe somebody has an owner's manual for this Panasonic that would talk a little bit more about that. Anyway, hope you enjoyed all this, as mixed up as it is. Thanks for watching. Bye.